Welcome back to another Human First AI Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Montague at Avenue 9. My guest this week is Michael Buckbee, founder of Knowatoa at knowatoa.com. You're probably going to have to check the show notes because I'm dyslexic and I can't spell it out for you. Also, Mike, I've never met a Mike that I didn't like. Have you found that other Michaels are just cool people?
For the most part. It was frustrating in school. There was always like 6 of us in every class, but yeah, I just leaned into it at this point. So,
but then you get the Mike, the Michaels, the Mickeys, the Mikeys, and everybody has to pick their own name.
Yeah, most of the time it goes to my last name because it's a lot more distinct than Mike. But you do
get a lot of last names too. Yeah, especially on sports teams where you're like, you don't want to confuse which Mike you're yelling at, so you gotta throw out the last names.
There's no confusion. It was always me. I was always the one messing up. They're like, oh, we know which one it is. So.
Buckbee. All right, let's start with what you do at Knowatoa, because I think this is interesting and something we haven't talked about yet. In a bunch of earlier podcasts, I've kind of mentioned that SEO, I feel like, is dead. Trying to optimize for organic search results, really tough, and nobody's hardly even seeing them compared to where we were 2 years ago. But you have this tool to talk about what I call AIO. You could probably give me the real term for it, but AI optimization of how do you show up in the results for Perplexity or ChatGPT and Claude, which I feel like is where people are getting their answers to traditional search queries. There's still different types of searches, and I saw some stuff on your website that I love that, like, if you're looking for restaurants near me, Google is probably still where people are going, and they're going to try and find the map listings or the phone number and stuff, and Google will show you those results. But if you're asking, how do I do something, that's a completely different search result. So can you kind of tell us where we are at the beginning of 2025 and the state of search queries?
Sure. So I'm going to start off strong and just like disagree with you, which is going to be weird. And I think the disagreement is mostly around what's SEO. So I have a background. I was director of demand generation at a big cybersecurity company for a number of years, was over the SEO team, content marketing. So I'm very familiar with that world. And then, when we talk about AI search, I think there is a tendency to talk about it as this like brand new thing. But if you look at Google, just Google, we'll just set aside everybody else. Google right now has said they're serving up AI overviews in their standard search results to over 1 billion people. That's mainstream. I mean, that's just stop right there. Nothing else happens in the world. That's mainstream on its own. And I think those results do show the future, which is that you're absolutely right. They're moving more towards answers. They're getting smarter. And for the most part, it really is that, the AI is going out and synthesizing the top like 5 or 6 results. And then, kind of giving you a summary of that. But I think there's also
kind of moving that way anyway before AI. They were using snippets and other things to get people answers faster anyway. To those
they are. Absolutely. But I think what's changed there is that, one, they're a lot more tailored. Like they aren't all the same. Like they're certainly cache, but they do update a lot. Yeah. And where I think it's going is that those are going to get smarter and smarter. And that's not really my speculation. That's like Google leadership saying, these are going to get smarter. This is our first take at this. I don't know. There was a leak that a lot of people didn't see, which was an Android preview build. And I think it was actually like Christmas Eve. So a lot of people didn't see this leak, but it was the interface for the new AI mode that's coming from Google, which is going to be a lot more, because right now they describe it as like 2 surfaces. There's your traditional go to google.com surface, and then you go to Gemini. And those are 2 separate things in 2 separate places. And AI mode is blending those together, where you can sort of toggle between them, or you can sort of say, hey, Gemini, figure this stuff out for me. And that's coming this year. Like that's going to be the next build. So, I mean, this stuff is happening really fast. And the other part where I wanted to disagree with you was, you said SEO is dead. And I think SEO is only dead if you only consider it as traditional search.
Right.
ranking and all of those things. I think we're actually sort of, starting at the same spot. It's almost like digital photography. Like there's a case to be made like, oh, there's film photography and now there's digital photography and now photography is dead. It's not dead. It's like literally 1,000 times bigger and people are taking more pictures than ever. I think we're going to see the same thing in search. We're going to see more and more different searches, and we're going to see an expansion of what it means to be like an SEO or someone who helps people figure this stuff out. But it is 100% changing, and I think it's very exciting for that. Just that with change, there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, I love what you talked about there with the opportunity, because I do think you're right. Things that we didn't think we could get answers to, or we didn't think about asking a search engine because it would be a huge pain before, now becomes possible. So I love your analogy too, because the phones and the cameras cameras and the phones made all the difference, right? That now all of a sudden there's a ton more people taking pictures, and they might not be traditional photographers, but the cost is cheap. Everybody has one. They're in their hands all the time, just making that easier. And I think AI is going to do the same thing. We're all going to have AI in our pocket, on our phone, and our Google Home devices, and everywhere else. That I think voice search for me didn't quite take off, because I don't think people necessarily like talking to robots, and you didn't know what to use it for. There wasn't like a training on it. But now with ChatGPT and others, I find myself like asking more logic-based questions rather than fact-based stuff. Like I can find out how old Tom Cruise is pretty quick, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a traditional kind of search term that we know about. But when I think about like, what's the best strategy for my business to go, do something else, that was not something I was asking search for, or I was prepared for a long, investigative discussion of checking a whole lot of websites and doing a lot of research and stuff, where now those answers are so much faster. It's a completely different type of environment for me.
Yeah. Well, and two things. You mentioned the cost difference, and something that I still struggle with is how much cheaper and how quickly it's getting cheaper it is to do AI stuff. And one of the issues is this is always said in like millions of tokens. Like, what's the cost per millions of tokens for compute? And that's just not something human brains are good at. But I saw a thing this morning that put it in terms of like extracting information from a PDF. And we've all worked with PDFs. And so now it basically, with the new Gemini Flash 2.0, there's probably going to be another one by the time this is released, that it's down to cost $1 to do 6,000 pages of PDF extraction. And if you look even just the littlest bit back at like what Anthropic Claude costs, about $1 to do 200 pages, or OpenAI ChatGPT costs, $1 to do 200 pages. So these just massive cost decreases to do AI. And part of that's, more efficiency. I know there's always concerns about the environment and energy. Those are becoming less and less. And I always just have to remind myself, this is the worst this AI stuff is ever going to be. Yeah. This is the most expensive it's ever going to be. And it really is just 1,000 times, literally 1,000 times cheaper than it was a year ago.
So I think all of that stuff is cool. I guess my question for you and marketers, and when I say SEO is dead, I kind of mean SEO traffic and as like a marketing tactic to drive traffic to your website. We're seeing that drop like over 50% for most places, because people are getting their answers on the first page rather than clicking through to your website to read the answer. And they're getting the answers inside of Perplexity rather than visiting your website. And so as lead generation tactic, or as a marketing tactic, I think that's changing a lot. So I'm curious, because I tried your tool a little bit, just playing around, and I love the idea. It gave me a ton of ideas for content to create and questions that I should answer, and searches where I'm most likely to show up for my website and stuff. I think all that is extremely valuable, but I'm wondering what you think the business case is. Like, how does this ever relate to branding, lead gen, some sort of insight for us if we go to the trouble of optimizing for AI searches?
Sure. So, like I said, I have a background in B2B enterprise SaaS. So this is full disclosure. That's the blinders I'm answering this on.
Yeah.
And in that world, what's really important is sort of the business discovery, the sales journey, the search journey, however you want to describe it. And everything in that is still happening. It just happens to be in a different place. That instead of people looking in Google and then they find something from Gartner that mentions 10 different companies, then they open up a spreadsheet and they start rolling through those companies and they're copying and pasting that. It's all happening in the AI now. So the search journey is still happening. So as a marketer, it's still our responsibility to figure out what people are searching for, to make sure there's accurate data that's been published that then shows up properly, and to make sure that where they're interacting with our site is now way down in the funnel, that they do all this in ChatGPT, then they do a navigational search. And there's tons of data to support that the vast majority of searches that happen are brand searches where people, they're just navigating, they're just using Google to get around, or they're informational. And so you mentioned what Knowatoa does is when you put your site in, and it's right on the homepage, just throw your domain in. We look up the top 1,000 traditional keywords you rank for, and then we do a filtering process on that. So we pull out all the informational things that, used to be in cybersecurity. What's a firewall? What's a proxy server? We're not going to be able to answer that better than ChatGPT or an AIO. So we're going to take our marketing efforts and move them downstream and really try to kill it at, hey, what is the best thing for my use case? What is, the best way to do this? And to get into those conversations that are a lot more higher intent, that have a lot more buying potential, the money or your life questions. And that's where I'm advocating people go with this. Yeah.
I love your idea of moving deeper in the funnel. Cause I was thinking still top of the funnel of how do we get people's attention? Because it's obviously going to all of these different tools first. But I love your answer because there are people, and I've done this search where you're like, give me the top 10 companies on X because I need to hire somebody. And ChatGPT is not going to come unclog your toilet or whatever, right? So you're gonna say who's the best plumber in Kansas City is still a interesting search query, and we want to show up in that. Do you know how these AI are creating recommendations and answers to that? Are they looking up traditional search factors? Is it a black box? I've asked some things of what are the top consulting companies for X, Y, or Z? And it seemed to be a random list that was not the same as a typical search result for me. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. I think there's three things to this. One, the fact that it's a random list, I think is a positive. It's a positive for us who are trying to rank for this, because it means that as challenger brands, as someone who's not, Nike or the giant Fortune 100 companies, that's where I say there's an opportunity to come in and start getting into those conversations where you don't have 40,000 backlinks, some company in traditional search. The clearest way I describe this is, repetition, which is that you need to create brand statement content that says hey, we just turned into 2025. We think we're the best cybersecurity company for you in 2025. Here's our 6 reasons for that. And you just lay those out. And the other piece of this is the expansion of what it means to be SEO. You were describing, we're going to lose this top of funnel traffic. We're not going to be able to do the traditional content marketing of we got 40,000 people in for this keyword. 500 of them signed up for our newsletter. 50 of them came into our webinar, and then we got on a call with 5 of them, and then we closed one. That's not going to work in the same way.
Right.
I'm not going to be able to fix that. You're not going to be able to fix that. We have to adapt.
Well, I do think, my current take on that, not to sidetrack you, but is, we call this the human first marketing podcast. Yeah. I think a lot of people were marketing for algorithms, and they were creating content for ranking and search words and not for human beings. And so what we're going to have to do is find the people that we already know, the clients we already know, and invite those people people we can connect to on social media and stuff and invite them to our webinars, rather than trying to find this mythical prospect that's out there in the ether that has no connection to us. I think that's going to be the much harder part, but I think we can start with the people we know first.
Yeah,
So back to what you were saying, I think there's some really cool, deeper.
Well, with respect to the expansion of what it means to do SEO, something that was said to me from a prospect was ChatGPT is now our most popular and least well-trained customer service representative. That,
that's great. Yeah.
Everybody asks questions, and those tend to be questions that are very much money questions, which is like, hey, do you operate in California? Are you SOC 2 compliant? Do you have, a HIPAA, product? Those are really important questions to be in that sales part. So something we've been advocating is that a lot of what used to be internal tools for that buying process, you start to think about creating a public facing version of them, which is oftentimes, the closest analog is like a buyer's guide. Like, hey, here's the buyer's guide to our product. Here are the features.
FAQs and wikis and things like that of knowledge.
Yeah. And in enterprise stuff, that stuff is closely guarded. They're like, oh, here's our battle card of how we match up against our top 5 competitors. And like, we will show this to you under NDA, but we won't actually put this out there.
I think it's been a huge mistake for a long time, but it's even worse now. I was going to bring that up, that I happened to be researching a vacation this year. I've taken like a big trip, and we were using ChatGPT and diving deep on compare Aruba to Costa Rica. What about the hotels, like food choices? How long is the flights, from one place to the other, and cost, and all these questions that we wanted to know, which one would be more active, which one would be more relaxing, are there more kids at one destination than the other, and all these comparison things that are really bottom of the funnel questions that I was diving deep on. And AI may or may not have that information on your company, depending on what you've put up.
Yeah. And so the buyer's guide, and here's, I'm still big on education, like trying to educate people, even in the face of, that used to be the content marketing. And something I think is an easy thing people can do right now, which is go to your AI tool of choice and type in, hey, help me make a buyer's guide for my company. And it will then ask you hey, what does your company do? What are the features? What are the sales objections? And there's a ton of information, deep in your bones about all this stuff that is not on your website. Because it's not on your website, it's definitely not going to be in the AI tools. And then it's definitely not going to be, in front of your prospects when they are searching for this stuff.
And not to give you a shameless plug, but I will anyway, Knowatoa.com, you put in your website and you give them the top questions. So you can start with that list of questions that show up in your free report, and then go into ChatGPT and start saying, I need to be able to answer these questions, right? I need to have something published that the response to these.
And so, a couple interesting things about it. There is a free report. It's just for ChatGPT. It's not for Claude or Gemini or the other services. It's a paid upgrade. A couple things there. We treat all of these as a series in the same way that you used to be able to look at keywords and hey, where do we rank, 6 months ago or a year ago, and where do we rank now? We treat ChatGPT Turbo 3.5, which is old now, as, oh, that's your historical ranking, and where do you rank now? And a really interesting thing you can see in the software is the patterns of updates, where both, if you look at those old results, hey, give me the best, top 10, countries to go to, it would just list the countries. And if you look in the new ones, or if you ask hey, what's the best email service provider for my company? It will actually give you hey, here's the key features of each one. Here's why, MailChimp is best for this, and SendGrid is best for this, and OmniSend is good for this market. And that is key information you can then turn around and capitalize on to either correct or to augment. And it's much more malleable than I think a lot of people think, where, we talk about this as a black box, but there's for sure things you can do to mess this up to not get indexed, to not be in there in the conversation. And there are just constant updates to this information where
So I want to ask you
yeah,
specifically about it. I love the biscuits idea that you had on there, and really fascinating that you've done a lot more work than most people have at figuring out what those criterias and those things are. Right?
yeah. And well, I think people still think this is like a monolith, that it doesn't change. And, there's actually been like 15 different changes between like ChatGPT 3.5 and 4. And that's either they updated the underlying data set, they updated the weights of how it was, they updated, some other fundamental things about this. And we actually track both what we call like the static data sets and then the dynamic data sets. And so the rightmost column in our report actually updates every week in the ChatGPT, because it's a reflection of what is in ChatGPT right now. And, it's very similar to algorithm updates in traditional search. Like every couple months, there's an update, it changes, there's an opportunity to jump up or, be kicked down. And we're just trying to help people steadily move up. So.
Yeah, and I guess I got a few more questions for you, but
Sure.
the last one on this topic, I think, is what you said about leveling the playing field. One of the reasons I jumped in with both feet is that I think it does give a chance for those challenger companies, small to medium sized businesses. Like everybody's figuring it out at the same time right now. And more money and more resources don't necessarily equal more success, because a lot of those incumbent companies are worried about their IP. They're still trying to protect legacy business models, and they just can't be as flexible and nimble. But I don't know that you need more money to do some of the strategies and stuff that we've been talking about, right?
So Mike, you mentioned the Biscuit framework, which is our framework for like how to rank well in these LLMs. And the B in the Biscuit framework is for bots. And something like 45% of like the Fortune 1000 are still blocking one or more of the prominent AI bots from their marketing website. Now, that's not like, hey, this is our proprietary information. This is the basic stuff of like, what does your company do? How is it open? Do you sell this thing? And they're blocking that out of a misguided reflex or out of a lack of knowledge. Something we have is like an AI search console to try to replicate, because there's no way to go to ChatGPT and say like, hey, index my website. You just got to kind of hope it happens.
Yeah.
So we have a tool that lets you check across 25 different AI indexing bots to see if you are blocking them actively. And, that's like the first step. It's an easy thing to do,
Well, so that brings me to my last technical question here is, have you done the research, or can you tell if most of the time companies are worried about their search queries being used for training data and sensitive stuff getting out there? But if we were trying to rank in searches, we would actually want our queries and our information we're sharing to be indexed. Can you tell if you're using free or if you have it turned on to influence training, that you can upload documents and stuff and add to the knowledge base and influence these queries at all?
There's no explicit way to do that still. I think that's probably going to come at some point, that in the same way that there is a search console for Google, that you have some control over this. I think we're going to see that eventually for all the different services. In the same way, I think we're eventually going to see like ad consoles and all sorts of other things for this. But the best things to do right now, and this is what we advocate, which is, one, you want to publish this, brand statement content that says like, hey, we're the best, or like, here's what we do kind of stuff. You want to then put that on your site. You want to make sure bots can reach your site, and lots of ways to check that. And then you want to also promote this out to all the other platforms that we know for sure these AI services are drawing information in from. It is literally a multi-billion-dollar investment that Microsoft has made into OpenAI, who runs ChatGPT. Part of the terms of that are explicitly they get access to LinkedIn data because Microsoft owns LinkedIn. They get access to GitHub data because Microsoft owns GitHub. And so, if you want this to show up, publish it to LinkedIn. almost all of the providers have millions of dollars they have spent to access Reddit data. They are not doing that for nothing. They're doing that because they're trying to draw this information in. So I think it's much less of a challenge to get your information into these than it is to get the right information in. A term we haven't touched upon so far is hallucinations, which is something people bring up to me a lot. And there's really two kinds of hallucinations. There's hallucinations for lack of data. The AI doesn't know what it is, so it just makes something up. And then there's hallucinations that come from like the weird reasoning, tricky riddle problems of like, A is before B, but C is before D. So where is B? Like that kind of stuff. We as marketers can directly solve the ignorance problem of like ChatGPT just doesn't know what my company does. I can state that in a way that then gets picked up. We can fix that. We can't fix the reasoning problems. That's on the AI search people. But like I said, this stuff is developing really fast. I think it's a big opportunity for people. So.
The reasoning is getting much, much better.
Oh, yeah.
So I think the hard part for them is defining, what a true or an accurate answer is in cases where there's not one. That's to me an interesting challenge, which brings us to our last set of questions here of how do you think this plays out? What do you think the world of marketing or SEO looks like 5 years or more in the future?
I think we're at the start of, I think we reached peak SEO last year, peak traditional SEO last year, and it's still around. It's still driving traffic. There's still no reason you shouldn't practice and do those things. But I do think it peaked, and I think we're going to start to see a decline. And I have a hard time thinking in 10 years, are we actually going to have, 10 a search engine results page? Like, is that something we actually want, And mostly my thinking is that we're going to have a lot of tools that do the Googling for us. And we're seeing those now. Those are all like ChatGPT released a deep research tool this week. Yeah. And Google already has another tool with the exact same name of deep research. Really wish they could have used some sort of software or system to come up with a different unique name, but no, they call it the same thing. And those do exactly this, which is they go out, they pick up 100 different sites, they synthesize it all together. Here's an example. I've been trying to get and talk to more people and be on more podcasts. I asked Google's deep research tool, give me a list of podcasts where they accept guests and that they have been updated in the last 3 months of 2024, that they actually had a new episode out. And it did that. It killed it, and gave me the data in a table, and I clicked the button and it was a Google Sheets doc, and that was like 5 minutes. And
that does then ultimately, like we were talking about, end up driving traffic to those podcasts and starting conversations that lead to business. So yeah, I think that part of it will still exist and be cool. So the thing I'm kind of struggling with at the moment is you have to manually switch in ChatGPT to a deep research question, where I would love it to be a little more intuitive and say like, no, I'm, like Google knows this, like when I'm looking for a local term or a search result versus trying to answer a question.
Yeah. I think the interfaces for this are, we said it earlier, this is the worst it's ever going to be and the most expensive it's ever going to be. And it's so weird to think about, but all like ChatGPT created a Google killer on accident. They weren't trying to do that. That was not what they set out to do, but they happened to do it along the way. And that's just crazy. And, the chat interface and the back and forth and a lot of it, I think, is going to become more and more streamlined, and it's going to just automatically draw in more and more context of what you're working on or looking at or doing. So I
go back and look at the first version of Facebook or something too, though. Be like, we were all using this. How was this even adopted by millions of people? So, all right, my last one for you is the crazy futuristic. Now we're going like, 15, 30 years in the future. Maybe which sci-fi movie do you think is most accurate in its prediction of the future? Or how do you see humanity playing out in a world with AI?
for both better and worse, I think her and, Blade Runner 2024, where the thing that concerns me the most, and
Combination.
especially with like my kids, is these services that like it takes over your emotional relationship. Like I'm okay using this to like find an email provider or like, where should I start my podcast host, like that kind of stuff. It does kind of freak me out, all of the people that are like, ChatGPT is the best counselor and therapist I've ever had. Like and the reasons they say are compelling. Like it's totally non-judgmental. It's always,
Wants to help. It's always positive and in good mood. I've heard of really interesting applications for like Alzheimer's and stuff where like humans get frustrated answering the same question over and over again, but the ChatGPT doesn't. But
Yeah.
I agree. I think it's going to be a spectrum. Like people have been falling in love with weird items and weird situations and getting catfished for a long time. That's certainly not going away. But loneliness is an epidemic too. I actually wrote a book over here called Playful Humans about some of the things that are happening in our society when we suck out play and actual human connection. So I don't think people are going to get healthier if they don't continue to try and have human relationships. But there are also some advantages for people that can't or otherwise, wouldn't be able or wouldn't try to interact with people. That there's some stuff. So I think it's a spectrum there. But the Blade Runner part is more what I'm worried about. I don't know how we're going to fix like universal income or our societal structures when we have super intelligence available in certain people's hands.
Yeah, I spend a ton of time thinking about this stuff and still feel like I don't know anything, that I, no idea how this stuff is going to play out. But, try. I think there are genuinely positive ways to use this. And, you mentioned like Alzheimer's patients and like asking that the AI doesn't mind doing the same thing over and over. I found that even in terms of like all the coding and stuff we're doing, where I would hesitate to ask another developer, like rewrite all these tests so they're just a little bit better or a little bit more coverage. But I'm like, yeah, the AI can do that. I'll just let it do that. That's great. So,
that's a great example.
So, all right.
How can you help us or we help you? You want to tell us a little bit more about Knowatoa?
Sure. Right now, like I said, we're still figuring this out. I think we've got a good first take at it. We've got tons of people using it, but if you want to help out, please go to knowatoa.com and just try your site, see what kind of questions, see what kind of returns it comes up with. And if they're great, please continue to use it. If they're bad, please tell me, and I will get on a call with you and work with you to figure something out. My email is mike@knowatoa.com. And I genuinely love talking to people. Like I'm happy to talk to anyone who's listening to this if they want to reach out. Yeah. So I guess that's
I love it. I feel like we're
is the way to help.
Spirits. The computer programmers and nerds that are comfortable talking to humans are very rare. So you got to take advantage of that. I will spell it. Knowatoa is KNOWATOA.com. Knowatoa. It's really cool. I haven't seen anything like it. I know there's a bunch of people, trying to figure out what's going on with these answers and stuff, but I love the tool that you've made. You got some really cool insights. Again, even if it's not specifically what you're looking for, if you can't learn something from their reports over there, then you're not a professional marketer. There's some good insights. So get in the right really direction, and go find out what Biscuits stands for on the website too. I love that part. And until next time, avenue9.com. If you want help figuring this out, working with your AI marketing strategy, or generative AI is my specialty. You want to make cool stuff, start a podcast, write a book, reach a new audience, specifically engage a community is what I've done through my whole career. And it's easier than ever to interact with the humans you already have and make the kind of content that can connect with other people. So reach out to me at Avenue 9 if that helps. Until next time, go have fun.